congratulations on your new job. We hope that your time as a resident teacher at the Saint Alphonsus Orphanage is a rewarding and easy experience. To help with the latter, here's a set of rules you absolutely must comply with, as well as make sure all the kids under your care follow. If you see a child endangering themselves and don't follow protocol, you'll be fired, with no previous notice. If you fail to follow the rules for teachers and residents in general, let's just say that unemployment won't be a concern anymore. General rules for residents. 1. Curfew is 9 p.m. No exceptions. Adults who need to be out after this time need to let Abbess Johansson know beforehand, and only return after 6 a.m. 2. By 11:11 p.m., all the lights should be turned off, except the large chandelier of the dining hall, which should be turned on at all times. Every resident is under obligation to report the malfunction of any lamp around the building. 3. The janitor, Mr. Dracule, is to be called at any moment for emergencies, day or night, except during 3:33 a.m. and 4:44 p.m. If something requires his attention between these hours, Abbess Johansson should exceptionally be called. 4. It's encouraged to let Mr. Dracule know that the front gate is open if you happen to see it from a window, but don't actively try to see it, and don't ever look outside from any window located on the second floor's south wing. 5. If the big painting of Saint Alphonsus on the main stairs seems to be moving, ignore it. Walk faster, and don't engage in conversation. He's harmless, but can be a handful if you let him escape. 6. The Mass on Mondays is mandatory for all residents, except the ones from the 4th floor and eventual visitors. No one is allowed to leave the chapel before 10:31 a.m. Rules for staff. 1. Kids under the age of 6 are strictly forbidden from leaving the 4th floor, including for meals, and have to be under the care of Miss Asimov at all times. The staff is allowed on the 4th floor if necessary, but it's discouraged to criticize Miss Asimov's educational methods or question her number of limbs. 2. The teacher's break room on the basement is permanently deactivated. Don't let the delicious smell fool you. There's no one inside. 3. The basement is to be used for storage only. If you see a small child there, don't look into its eyes. Retreat without turning your back to it, and immediately call Mr. Dracule. 4. The playroom on floor 2 is off limits for adults. We believe in letting teenagers have their own space. Don't let the sound of scratches on the door intimidate you. They know what they are doing. 5. At the start of every class, you must lock the door and count how many kids are under your care. At the end of the class, before unlocking the door, count again. If one of the kids is missing, immediately let Mr. Dracule know. If there's one extra kid, read the scroll accompanying this letter as fast as you can until the lights stop flickering. 6. The unadoptable are allowed to roam freely around the building, unless there are visitors. It's easy to spot them, as they use very distinctive crimson cloaks. There's no harm in talking to them. They're quite friendly if you don't try to peek under their mantle. However, if you see one of them when you're with potential parents, just break a bottle of holy water by throwing it on the floor. Don't hesitate to do it, as your room is supplied with 12 of them per week. Rules for the children. 1. Skipping classes is obviously against the rules, but skipping classes on Wednesdays means a fate worse than death itself. If you see yourself outside of a classroom on Wednesday during school hours, immediately seek shelter in the chapel, and only leave when you stop hearing chanting. 2. It's strictly forbidden to shower in the boys' bathroom on floor 3. Other uses are allowed, as long as you're carrying a crucifix on your body. If a boy tries to talk with you from a stall in an unknown language, leave immediately. 3. Bedroom doors are only to be closed at 9 p.m., after making sure that all your roommates are inside. Always check their lips, and under no circumstances allow a fellow to enter the bedroom if their mouth is blue, or if you don't recognize them. If that happens, pour holy water on them, and let Mr. Dracul know immediately. 4. Food is forbidden outside the dining hall, as well as forks, knives, and utensils made of metal. Food scraps are always to be discarded by the specialized staff. If you're feeling hungry or snacky between meals, simply excuse yourself to the dining hall. Mrs. Martel will know how to solve your problem. 5. It's encouraged to interact with potential adopters, but take a careful look at them. If a man with very thin legs tells you that his daughter is on the 4th floor, do not believe him, and do not give him directions to get there. It's easy to recognize him, because his legs are thin like matches, and one of his shoes is too small. 6. When in trouble, you can contact a teacher or inspector to help you find Mr. Dracul, but they are not qualified to deal with the happenings described on this list. Observe them thoroughly before approaching them. We don't have a red-haired teacher who's over 2 meters tall on the staff. Best regards and God bless us all. Abbess Laurel Johansson. This is the letter I got by mail a few weeks after submitting for my first job. I was straight out of university with a huge student debt and decided not to be picky about my options. Besides, I lived in an orphanage myself until I was 7, and the nuns took great care of me, so it felt like some karmic opportunity to give back. It's weird to say that, but I really enjoyed my time as a teacher at the Saint Alphonsus Orphanage. It was great to feel like I was making a difference for those kids who had no one else but us. And all of them were incredibly well behaved, almost like they spent the early years of their childhood under military training. The staff consisted of 8 teachers, around 20 nuns, commonly referred to as inspectors, the kitchen/cleaning staff, and the ever-present Mr. Dracul. Despite a name that suggested some creepiness, he was a lovely, hard-working older man. We teachers had individual rooms, and no strict rules about our free time. As long as we were inside the building before 9 p.m. and turned the lights off before 11 p.m., we were fine. I got along well enough with the other teachers, but we weren't close since they were all so much older than me. Jody, the old history teacher, was the only one who was slightly unpleasant. She took a habit of asking me if I planned to waste my life in a nunnery, her words, and why I had no boyfriend. As a damn boomer, she was flabbergasted to find out about the extension of my debts and how expensive it was to rent a small apartment. The salary at the orphanage was below average, but the fact that I had free housing and free food more than made up for it. Despite the fact that there wasn't a specific rule regarding the nuns, I soon learned the ones I should avoid. Sister Alistair was the creepier of them. One of her eyes never moved, perpetually staring at the bridge of her nose. It didn't even blink, so she carried a huge bottle of saline solution with her, dropping it on her bad eye every 5 minutes. She looked at least 80 years old, but walked as nimbly as a teenager, with half her weight. One day, she simply vanished. Her room, perfectly tidy, full of unopened bottles of eye drop, and no one saw or heard what happened to her. People disappearing wasn't, unfortunately, a rare occurrence. However, every time it happened, there was a lot of talking between the kids and us teachers for days. Jane Alistair was soon simply forgotten, like she was never there. To this day, I still don't know if she was some sort of supernatural being or just a misunderstood woman with a simple physical defect. Being a physics/science teacher, it took me a while to admit that the paranormal was between us. It was only on my first month as a teacher that I witnessed something that I can't explain. I was going up the stairs around 10:30 p.m. I stayed a little too long at the library reading the 7th grade papers, and everything was too empty and quiet. "What a lovely young lady!" a cheerful, masculine voice shouted behind me. Suddenly, there was an otherworldly, compelling atmosphere. I almost couldn't resist turning back to look at him. I opened my mouth to reply as a little red light twinkled on the background of my brain. What was it again? I felt my body in slow motion. Then someone shoved me so hard I almost fell face first on the steps. "Silly girl! Haven't you read your admission letter? Alphonsus, leave at once." It was Abbess Johansson. Her authoritative figure made me feel both scared and relieved, and I remember pathetically begging her not to fire me. "I'm not firing you. You didn't talk to him. If being about to disobey the rules got people fired, I would need to close down this orphanage." "Madam, I'm so sorry." "Suzanne, you're a good teacher and the children like you. Be more careful and you'll have a bright future ahead." I was more careful. Over the next year, the only incident I had happening with me was realizing one of my students went missing during class, with the door locked. I didn't understand how it happened, and I still don't, but I immediately let Mr. Dracule know, and Anthony was found, safe and sound. After the incident with Saint Alphonsus, I didn't see Abbess Johansson constantly, but I somehow always felt her severe stare on me. I had just started my 3rd year as a teacher when I screwed up. I took the 8th grade to a field trip to the aquarium. They were to write a simple report about the species they enjoyed the most. Science was just an excuse to do something nice for the kids. All of them used the opportunity to buy themselves some candy, sodas, and other treats we only had on special events at the orphanage. I forgot to check their pockets and backpacks as we returned. That was mistake number 1. Then, I saw one of my favorite students eating a chocolate bar on the playground, and my first impulse was deciding to turn a blind eye to it. After all, candy hardly qualifies as food, right? As I soon realized why I shouldn't do that, I started running towards him, but it was too late. Something had awakened. It's been 6 years, and I still can't forget the crunching sounds, as the earth itself seemed to come to life and swallowed Anthony whole, chewing pleasantly on his little bones. I'm tormented by it, whether I'm awake or sleeping. I was terrified to report the incident and decided to hide what I witnessed until I calmed myself down, but Abbess Johansson knew. She knew every single thing that went by on her orphanage. As to how, I have to mention that as she summoned me to her office to fire me, I noticed something on the corner of her mouth. The slightest chocolate stain. A huge thank you to all my poltergeists. Stephen Swiftbird, Shadow Blackhawk, Spirit Father, King Gallant, JTX 31, Joker Smurf 3, Daniel O'Connell, Gary, Forever, Nathan Konirk, John, Twisted Skipster, and Benjamin Kroon. Your donations are much appreciated, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. I realize now what it was. Why I am dreaming in the wrong tense. Because I'm standing here now, and I guess I prefer to experience it all as something else. Something else. A dream, a memory, a nightmare. Just not the present.